This week is my honor to welcome famed acting coach, director, entrepreneur, Michelle Danner. Michelle, how are you?
Hi, I'm pretty good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. How have you been faring through the COVID-19 pandemic? I know that it shut the industry down essentially when it first happened in March of 2020. As someone who not only acts and directs, but you also run your own acting school, how did that affect you and the multiple aspects of the industry that you're involved with?
Well, I had just finished shooting a movie, like right there, right before we called it a lockdown. So I had the luxury of editing during that time. So I was very creative. And of course, developing other projects. So I didn't have a lot of downtime. I was super busy, um, just doing a lot of things, but experienced a certain relaxation with myself, which taught me a great lesson. In the past, when I've edited, I was always on a time schedule, frenetic, on the treadmill, like I said. And now it's like, relax. We didn't know what's going to happen. What day of the week is it? What time? I don't know. It was just, and that led to a lot of creativity. So coincidentally, this is my fifth feature film. And since then, we've done the festival circuit. We premiered at CineQuest. We went to World Fest Houston, suspense thriller in Europe, many places. One of them in Italy, Ferrara and Ischia. It's been, and I went. I flew to Europe. I took my kids. It was just, and I went to Catalina. They showed it there where we won, and we won tons of awards for this movie. So I started to like put two and two together, and said to myself, maybe this idea of feeling more released in your work is the key to doing better work, as opposed to just got to get it done and got to do this scene today. It's like, relax, we're all going to get there. So, anyway, I learned a wonderful lesson. The only thing, of course, that it was peppered by watching the news, which was really depressing, and having a couple of meltdowns when we saw what was happening in the world, because obviously this is a problem that affected everybody. So my personal journey and my kids' journey have been great. We did have to shut down our theaters. We shut down our school, but we discovered Zoom very much like this. And at first we all rebelled and we all hated it. And then we grew to love it. And now, if you're asking me if I should go to a meeting a half hour away or do a Zoom meeting, I opt to do a Zoom meeting.
Well, it does provide a certain level of convenience that, if you're an actor, you don't have to rush across town to speak in front of a camera for 5 to 10 seconds. You can just get ready at your home, set up your lights, your camera, and you just do it that way. And I know for me personally, back when I was doing my old show, I haven't done an in-person episode of a podcast since March of last year. But it's so much easier because it gave me a chance to build a studio, get a fancy webcam, some lights, and gave me the opportunity to write more scripts and work on other projects too. So I think while there is the tragedy of it all, it really is what you make of it, like what you make of the situation. Because I heard a saying a long time ago that I live by, that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. So
No, I
I
love
think
it.
I think the fact that you took advantage of being locked down to be creative in other ways, I think is a great success story.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, I commented with my kids. We lived. We also, I have an aging mother and a sick sister in New York. So we ended up going to New York. We quarantined. We went to the Hamptons to quarantine on the beach, but then we made our way over to New York and spent time with the family. And like I said, we traveled to Europe. We went here to Yosemite, which was beautiful and not crowded at all. We went to Laguna Beach down in Orange County. So we did a lot. I mean, I feel like we did a lot, and we enjoyed life, and it was a good time for us. I would go as far as saying that I changed many aspects of my life, which were great.
No, absolutely. That's great to hear. And I did want to backtrack a bit because you actually were raised in a show business family. Your dad worked for the William Morris Agency. So was it basically from early on in your life you knew that this was going to be the business that you worked in?
I don't. I think I was always. I was a big reader, and so I think it started with my love of literature, and not only of novels but biographies and plays and screenplays. And I would take myself to museums at a very young age, because my parents were wonderful hippies and busy and doing their own thing and letting us do our own thing. So I was very independent. Um, but yeah, I mean, I grew up in a showbiz environment. My dad was the head of the William Morris agency in Paris for many years. And so I was hid under his desk playing as I watched big icons come through the door. Um, and so my passion grew, but it really started, I think, with literature. And then it was everything was a building, everything was a stepping stone. So we came back to New York when I was 15. I studied with Stella Adler, with Uta Hagen, just always loved acting because I was always a very emotional person and always wanted to express myself that way and tell stories in that way. And then at some point, I I had so much knowledge because I studied with so many people that I passed it down. I started to coach, and I remember a distinct moment when I was in my guest house in Santa Monica, where literally I had like 8 coachings in a row, and my agent called and said, "You get 3 auditions today," and I had to make a decision: do I get in the car and drive and not coach these 8 people, or? And so I just said, and she dropped me after that. I said, I'm just gonna coach the 8 people. Um, and then, I just became, very prolific as an acting teacher. And then from there, I went ahead and started to direct and started to direct feature films. Everything was a stepping stone, and it had to do with basically a fundamental belief that I have to raise the bar all the time. To just challenge yourself to what's the next thing, and so I have an unrestlessness in me that I think is healthy, where I want to push myself to try things that are harder and harder. So that's even now, with the projects that I'm picking, the next projects that I'm going to direct, more challenging, more difficult, physical comedy, period piece. So I believe in pushing yourself, and it's very much, I don't just, talk the talk, I walk it too, because that's the philosophy that I talk to my students and my kids. I have 2 kids where I say, got to push yourself. We all watched the movie Whiplash. I said, without the blood, everything is metaphoric, but you've got to push yourself to, be the best you can be.
And I think that's great because, with you being in the industry as long as you've been, that you could essentially find one thing to do and be content with it. But I think that's so admirable that you find new things to do, whether it's becoming an acting coach, being a director, finding new challenges, because there's so much to do within the industry, from directing to writing, audio, camera. There's so many things you can do in the industry. I think the fact that you, in a way, add new dynamic to your repertoire is pretty fantastic. Do you think when you transition to being a director as well as an actor and an acting coach, did your experience as an actor help with that? And if so, in what way did it help?
You're right. I mean, it never escapes me how, grateful and fortunate I feel that I am doing something that I'm really, really passionate about in my life. Um, I mean, I think, of course, understanding actors on a deep level helps me on set as a director, and how I communicate with them and how I understand how to fix a moment that maybe, could be different, or support the story more. And that I do know most of the time how to speak with that actor so I can get them to go to that place inside of themselves and give that choice. So yeah, it's just, I feel like when you're doing the thing that you love doing, life just, of course, is very sunny and warm.
It doesn't feel like work.
No. Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
no, it doesn't work sometimes. I always say, you have to push yourself to do it when you don't want to do it. I mean, most of the time, I really honestly don't want to do anything. I just want to stay home and watch Netflix and movies and go swim. But no, I have to push myself to do it. And yeah, because when you're waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go on set and it's cold and have challenges in terms of how you're going to shoot. And of course, inevitably shit happens. If I can say that on your
Yeah,
show.
yeah, yeah. No,
You
no,
know,
that's perfect.
in the world of independent movies, but also in the world of, big budget movies, it happens and you have to deal with it and you have to overcome obstacles. And it's not always so easy, but you find a way. And after that, when you're sitting in the editing bay or when you're watching it in a theater, and you go, oh yeah, I remember that day. Yeah, I remember what happened that day, trying to get the crane down on the beach when the tide was, impossible. But we did it and we got it, and it feels good. It feels good. Completion always feels good.
Absolutely. And you touched on something that I've honestly never really talked about, in my years of podcasting when it comes to movies. As a filmmaker, when you go back, whether you have a premiere or just a little get together and you watch the finished product, every scene invokes like some type of emotional response because you think, oh, well, this crazy thing happened when we filmed the scene, at the beach or whatever the case may be. That is a really cool thing that I've never really touched on, but it's something that, whenever I did my short film a couple of years ago, when we had the premiere for it, every scene invoked some type of funny story or something like that. So
Yeah.
that is really cool.
And the audience helps you with that. And that's the reason why I know, and especially with COVID, we've all, watch at home. And even with some of the movies that came out with my kids, we said, let's go watch it in the movie theaters. But then we ended up watching it at home because we could get it on demand. But The Runner, this last movie that I did, that did the festival circuit, we were showing it at the Chinese in Hollywood to a packed house, a beyond sold out house. People were standing. And to experience those responses as you watch the work that you've done with responses around you and people are reacting to it, that's something that we can never replace. We can't replace having that experience, a communal experience, all of us together watching a story and reacting to it. There's nothing greater than either going to see a show on stage and then share that, experience with other people. Or in a movie theater.
You're absolutely right. And I think of my fiance and I went to go see the new Ghostbusters movie in the theater and just hearing the audience's reactions when, certain things would happen. Like you wouldn't get that from just watching it on your couch at home. So I'm happy that movie theaters are starting to make the comeback because that's a feeling that can't be replicated, whether you're watching your own work or you're just going to a movie to get lost in the story for a couple of hours. Nothing replicates that feeling to me.
Nope. And that's why theatrical will always be. And especially now as hopefully we're getting to, the other side of this pandemic, that we can all go back to watch movies together in a theater. And, things are back already, but that they continue to be back.
Absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about your first feature film that you directed, which was How to Go Out on a Date in Queens. How was that transition to doing a feature for the first time? Were you nervous at all? Or take me through your mindset of going through your first feature film as a director.
I tell this story because, I built theaters and generously Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks contributed. And I ran into them my first day of shooting. I went to pick up a coffee and something at this, what is no longer on Montana here in Santa Monica, the Montana Cafe. And I ran into them and they were having breakfast. And I went up and I said, I'm so nervous, Stephen, Tom, I'm nervous because today is my very first day on my very first feature film. And Steven Spielberg said to me, let me tell you something. You will be nervous on your 20th feature film. You're always going to be nervous. So, it was nerve wracking. I had a wonderful cast: Jason Alexander and Ron Perlman and Isai Morales and Allison Eastwood. And a wonderful cast, Rob Estes. and we Kimberly Paisley, she was great. And you know, we played. We just went to play, and it's a cute little movie. And I learned a lot. You know, I had not gone to film school. I just studied film, and it was a great lesson. It was my very, very first movie.
I'm sure that, because I can't really think of anyone that you could get better advice from when it comes to directing a feature film than Steven Spielberg. So it's almost like a movie in itself that you would run into Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks of all people.
All right. You know, it was like just basically a passport to say, accept your nerves, because they're going to be there anyway. You're going to be nervous. But I mean, the thing that I've learned after 5 feature films is this: the more clarity you have, the more preparation you have. And, you know, you're always going to be nervous. I mean, I think he's right, because if you care, you're going to be nervous. And, you know, as the director, you care. But the more clarity you have and the more prep you have, the more freedom you have to explore and to play. So I learned that. And of course, you have to know, and that only comes through experience. You have to know how to inspire, you know, your team around you. You have to know, you know, the questions to ask, because if you don't know, then you learn, you know. Um, I just had an experience now putting up some signs in our place, and I thought I had asked all the questions, but I didn't ask how strong the LED lights were. And now, if I ever have to put a sign up again, I know exactly what question to ask. That only comes from doing it and learning, you know, and then falling on your face. And you have to allow yourself to fall on your face, because failure is just as important as success.
And sometimes failure is the best teacher as well.
So, yeah,
Eh,
it's good to fail.
eh,
It's painful, but
yeah,
ultimately it's good.
but as long as you take a lesson out of it, then I think failure is worth it. So, you mentioning the cast you had with Jason Alexander, Ron Perlman, and others, I'm sure having a great cast as well as a great crew probably helped calm your nerves a bit. And in a way, it probably increased your confidence, right?
Well, when you cast actors that, you know, you don't have to work so much. I've worked with other actors like Paul Sorvino and Dan Lauria and Norman Reedus. You know, and when you say action, you just watch them. You watch them do their thing. And it doesn't mean, you know, I've gone and given suggestions, of course, and discussed a little bit the scene and what the scene could be. But when you cast it right, uh, it is easier. It's easier.
For sure. Talk to me now about your latest film, The Runner, which those who are watching the video version of the show, your background has quite a few laurels on it. So, talk to me about the making of that film and its run in the festival circuit.
Yeah, and I think it's my fifth movie. I think probably the movie that got the most, you know, accolades. Partly, I think, is because it came out of me. It was a story that I watched in the news late at night that made me cry. And I woke up the day after and I wrote a 3 page treatment and asked a friend of mine, wonderful writer, Jason Chistrell, if he would just take a stab and do the screenplay, which he did. And then we worked on the screenplay. And you know, it was a story. It was about what happens when kids get in trouble and fall through the cracks, and law enforcement wants to bring down the big drug lord kingpin of the town and forces, you know, these underage kids without the knowledge of their parents to wear wires, try to capture for the greater good, but then stuff happens. And that's what the movie's about. Through an action thriller, it really tells the story of this kid that's way in over his head. And I had a student, and I was studying in our conservatory program, and he was just the perfect choice for this character. And I knew it, and I gave him a script, and he loved it. And, you know, the rest is history. We shot it. We were not going to shoot it when we did. We were going to wait and shot it after. The little did we know we would have never shot this movie, but we shot it right before everything happened with COVID. And I showed a cut of it to a lot of different people, and he got a huge agent out of it. And this summer he was on the Ridley Scott set, The House of Gucci with Lady Gaga. And we'll see. I'm sure he's going to have a wonderful career, but The Runner is the lead, you know, the kid that you see behind me. his first movie, and he did absolutely great.
That's fantastic. Is the runner available to watch? Is it still making its way
Not
through the festival
yet.
circuit?
It finished the festival round after it won tons of things, and now it's being negotiated for distribution. The good news is that we have some great offers on the table, so I'm sure we'll go with one of them, and we'll close this month, and then it'll be out next month. I mean, not next month, early next year. It
Okay.
takes a couple of months to come out. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. I'm excited to hear it. I mean, it sounds like an interesting film with a great premise. So I'll be excited to watch it whenever it's available.
I would love for you to watch it. I was doing an interview yesterday at USC, and they had seen the trailer. I don't know if you get a chance to see the trailer. It's out there, and people were this really good feedback. People really want to see it, which obviously, as a filmmaker, that's what you want to hear.
Absolutely. So what's next for you? Do you have any other projects in the works as far as scripts or any other films you have in the works?
Yes, I'm working on a project called The Italians, which is a wonderful comedy with a lot of heart and a lot of Italian food. I was watching The Big Night with Stanley Tucci, which he did, 15 years ago. A wonderful inspiration. And then I have another movie called Love in Retrograde. That's a romantic comedy that we're also working on. So yeah, if everything goes well, I'll be shooting two movies back to back.
Fantastic. What is one piece of advice that you have as we start to wrap up here? What is one piece of advice that you could give to an aspiring filmmaker?
I would say do what I did not do, which is, um, immerse yourself so deeply. I remember, and I've talked about this in other interviews, that I had a very strong defense mechanism in me that never allowed me to want to watch anything more than once because I've seen it. And I feel that that is not a good thing. I watch my son, who's an aspiring filmmaker, and his ability to watch things over and over and over again, and it makes him really go deeper inside of the process and inside of the craft. And he writes as well. And if I had given myself, an advice back then when I did study a lot. It's not that I didn't, but just go deeper, immerse yourself more. And then I was actually, because this question gets asked a lot of me when I do interviews, I I met this famous composer over the weekend, and I asked him the same question. And he said that he basically tells aspiring composers to have a desire in them to want to be the best, to drive yourself. And I think that, of course, encompasses just studying a lot and watching a lot, and doing a lot.
And that's something that I've had to do as well. I I like watching things multiple times to a point, but not for the studying aspect of it. It's like, for example, the movie Chef. I'm using that as a basis for my next project that I'm working on. And I found myself watching it over and over again to analyze like the way the shots look, the color, the dialogue, everything. So I agree 100% with that advice.
Study so you can go deeper inside of it.
Absolutely. Last question. I always like to end the interviews with this. What's one thing that you've watched recently that you would recommend to everyone? It could be a film or
When,
a series.
when Harry Met Sally, it's just when it comes to rom-coms, you can't get better than that. It's all the way up there. There's something so beautiful about the screenplay that Nora Ephron wrote, that the movie that Rob Reiner, directed, and Billy Crystal, Meg Ryan, Bruno Kirby, and Carrie Fisher's performances, and everyone else in that movie. It's just a wonderful, wonderful movie to watch. And a lot of the younger generation haven't watched When Harry Met Sally, but to its testament, it certainly stood the test of time. I mean, it's like over a quarter of a century ago it was shot, and yet it's funny and just it's got so much heart in it. I loved it.
It definitely still holds up, and you're right. It is one of those standard bearers when it comes to romantic comedies. So that's a great choice. Do you have a website or social media that you'd like to plug so the viewers and listeners can follow you?
Yes, and I'm always very bad with that, but I think it's Michelle Danner LA for the Instagram. MichelleDanner.com leads you to everything. I have two schools, Los Angeles Acting Conservatory, Michelle Danner Acting Studio. So I know I'm very, very online. You can find that.
Fantastic. Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.